welcome, and it's that time of the week again. It's the Ort Jet Business Show. I'm your host, David Zidel, and we're going to talk business. Our special guest today is Lori Milner, and she runs a business called Beyond the Dress. But we're going to go way beyond the dress, because it's not just about business for women, it's business for men, it's business for everybody. But her question that she asks is, are you ready to own your days? And we're going to unpack that a little bit. But before we get to Lori, and I'm going to introduce her in more detail a little bit later on, I just want to start off, as I always do, with a little bit of a business story. And this story is around Starbucks. And Starbucks started in 1971. And at that time, lots of people made coffee, but no one made this special coffee. And they took ordinary coffee and they changed it into a brand. And they tried to follow what was happening in Italy. And they made it with the Italian experience. But what's more than that is Howard Schultz, who's the CEO of Starbucks, has a quote. And if I had to ask you, in fact, before I tell you about the quote, if I had to ask you, what business is Starbucks in? You'll most probably tell me they're in the coffee business. I mean, that's a crazy question. And Howard Schultz says, we're not in the coffee business serving people. He says, we're in the people business. We just happen to be serving coffee. And the lesson in that is, from the outside, a business can look the same as any other business, but it's where's your focus? Is your focus on the product, or is your focus on the person using your product? And it'll change your business around if you make it about the person who's using your product. And I think that links very nicely into what Lori's going to be talking about today. And it's around what we call micro wins, little wins. It's around, do you run your day, or does your day run you? It's, do you show up all the time when you need to? Do you make promises to yourself and not keep them? And Lori's passionate about empowering people to have these micro wins, to be successful. And she'll talk, and hopefully we'll talk about a toolkit and unpack the toolkit. And there's a little saying that says, if the only tool you've got is a hammer, you see every problem as a nail. And so you just use the same thing over and over again, and again, not related to the person. So, Lori, I know you've done TED Talks and you've written a book that you wrote with Nadia Bilchik called Own Your Space. And so we're giving you some space here to share some of these things that you think that we should be covering. And just during this talk, there's three key things I'd like to talk about. Is spend your time creating your future self. That would be the one. The other is these micro wins. And earlier we were talking and you spoke about one of the key things to being successful is consistency. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm not even sure where to begin. Where should we start?
So I think start unpacking a little bit about creating your future self. What does that mean, creating your future self? And is that one of those tools that would fit into a toolbox?
Absolutely. So if I said to you, are you the same person you were 5 years ago? What would you say?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. So are you going to be the same person in 5 years' time?
Absolutely not.
So now if you can see current you and future you as two different people, you're going to start to make very different decisions today. So let's say, for example, and when I say think about your future self, what would they look like? So I said, imagine yourself in 5 years' time. If you had to run yourself through a typical day, so not an ideal day, I always love to say an ideal average day, so an average Thursday, what would you love to see from the moment you wake up to when you go to sleep at night? So this is an exercise anybody can do, and it just gives you clarity. What do I want my morning to look like? How do I want to feel as I navigate the day? What am I doing in the day? And so you'd go through, what is it that I'm looking to create? And where does that show up now? Is, let's say, 5 years' time, I want to be in this specific role, but you know what? It requires a lot of public speaking.
So are you saying right now I should think as if I'm 5 years ahead and how that day would look, or how today looks?
So the exercise would be, imagine how you in 5 years, so David in 5 years' time, what would you love to see? What would you love to create? So let's give an example. You're a great public speaker, but a typical example I'd give is, let's say someone says, I would love to be marketing director, but it means I've got to do a lot of public speaking. Current me is terrified. Hate public speaking. I tell myself I can't do it. I'm bad with people. But in order for me to set future me up for success, it means I need today to start getting really comfortable. It means I need to start putting myself forward, building those skills so that when I get there, I've already set myself up for success. So having this understanding in this picture of who I want to be, number one, gives you permission to change identity.
Right.
Often we give ourselves labels. I'm a procrastinator. I'm not a morning person. I can't do this. But when you can give yourself permission to say, well, this is who I'd love to become. This is who I'd love to step into. Geez, I would love a morning. And what's interesting is when I do this in workshops, and I'll give people about 10 minutes, and I'll say, tell me about what it is you're looking to create. It's never these monumental goals. It's not, I want to be CEO of this company. It's pretty much their same day, but I want to feel more relaxed. I don't want to worry all the time. I don't want all this anxiety. I just want space for me. And that's often what's missing, is that people don't give themselves permission to show up in the calendar. And that ideal day is really just a little bit more of them. And it's saying, well, we don't have to wait 5 years. What can you start doing today?
So would you say this is a form of like a gap analysis between where I'm now and where I'd like to be?
Absolutely. But then it's also a filter. So when I know if I've got to make a decision, do I want to hit snooze, or am I going to go for the walk? Or I said I was going to journal, or I said I was going to read something. It's almost imagining future you looking back and going, please make the best decision today. So it's the filter of, what am I saying yes to? What am I saying no to? What habits are preventing me from getting to future self? What habits do I need to introduce to catapult me into my future self? So it really is it brings meaning in the present, because often when people feel, they'll say to me, I'm stuck, or I'm not sure where to go. It's because they've lost a compelling future vision.
Okay. And one of the things that you spoke about, changing your identity. So James Clear, where he wrote
Atomic
Habits, it says that's one of the key things within that is, instead of saying, I want to go running, if you change it in your mindset, I'm a runner,
Absolutely.
and now I'm going to go running, it has a different impact. Is that what you're talking
That's
about?
Exactly. So, and thank you for quoting that. So it's exactly from Atomic Habits. He says true behavior change is identity change, because anyone can go for a run once or twice, eat healthy once or twice, but when we shift the belief, and then every time we do the habit, every time we do the action, it's the evidence. I am the kind of person who can do these things.
And is that the micro wins that you talk about? Because let's say I want to change completely and I'm not there. And then I say, I'm a great runner. And let's say I'm not a great runner. My mind's going to say, you're talking rubbish. So how do you change that identity that you believe it, and then or do you just say it, and by doing the right things, then you start believing it?
Absolutely. So what you said, if I just tell myself I'm a runner, but I'm not getting up and putting in the work, then it's delusion. But if I decide I want the identity of a healthy person, a vibrant person, I want to get into running, the micro win, I can't just get up and run 5Ks. A micro win is, you know what, I'm going to walk 10 minutes around my block. I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to go on a treadmill for 10 minutes, or I'm going to do 5 squats in my lounge. That's the micro win. I started. That's the evidence. And often what we do, and even, not even talking from an exercise point of view, but generally, we are not great at acknowledging our wins. So often when I'm coaching high performers, they'll achieve amazing things and they don't acknowledge it. Yeah, but next thing. And if we don't acknowledge the win as we get it, so that's what it is, acknowledging the win. Number one, it can be so tiny, because that's the start, that's the evidence I'm becoming it. But then why we need to acknowledge it is it's about integrating it as part of our identity. Because if we just keep doing it and not acknowledging it, that's when imposter syndrome shows up.
So that acknowledgement, does it have to be me just saying, oh, I've done it? Or does it have to be like I give myself an actual reward?
So it's BJ Fogg in his book. He wrote a book called Tiny Habits. And one of the success steps, so his formula is, after I I will, and then I celebrate. So after I,
Okay, so let me take this. So you say after I,
so I'll give you an example
Right.
of what he says is a great habit. He says, he calls it the Maui habit. He says, after I wake up and put my feet on the floor, I'll tell myself it's going to be a great day, and then I celebrate. And the way to celebrate is I smile. So it sounds, oh, well, that's positive thinking rubbish, but what's the alternative? When I wake up and after I wake up and put my feet on the floor, I check my phone and I panic, and then then we move into stress mode. So the after I is link it to an existing, whatever's existing in what you do in your schedule now. After I open my laptop,
so it's after I, and then what was that one you said?
I will.
I will. And
So
then
after I wake up, I will take 3 mindful breaths. And then the celebration. So he says habit change is about emotion management, because if you imagine when a toddler's learning to walk and they take those few little steps, and if they fall down 50 times, what do? We celebrate them and we go, great. It's positive reinforcement at the right moment of action. So then this little person is all inspired, happy, oh, I'm doing something right, tries again and again and again.
So you're saying do that for yourself?
Yes.
And so it's after I, and it's I will, and the last one?
Then I celebrate.
Then I celebrate, okay.
And it sounds silly, and you may feel silly, but that's the acknowledgement. And he literally gives you 100 ways to celebrate. You could do the floss dance. You could give yourself a pat on the back. You could do a little dance, whatever. You could see fireworks going off. But the point of doing it is acknowledging it. Otherwise, you're going, well, I only did, I wanted to start reading, but I only read 1 page, so it doesn't count. Well, I only did 5 minutes. But that's how we start. And the whole point of why make it small is we want to create the system. So again, to quote James Clear, says, we don't rise to the level of our goal, we fall to the level of our system. So rather than say, I want to read, so I've got to read 50 books by the end of the year, the habit could be, I'm going to carry around a book. I'm going to read before bed. I'm in the habit of reading before bed. I mean, one habit, if we just swapped out scrolling or emails with reading, everybody would sleep a lot better. So it doesn't matter if you read 1 line or 10 pages. It's the system.
So I'm going to ask you about that system and whether that links to consistency. Okay. But for anyone just listening in and you're thinking, wow, these are unbelievable words of wisdom. Who's this that's talking to us? So it's Lori Milner, Beyond the Dress. That's your consulting business, is that right? Or coaching business?
So let's say consulting. It is a misleading name, and there's a long story behind it, which we won't get into. But effectively, yes, my day-to-day, I'm coaching, whether it's executive coaching, training, speaking, sitting, I'm in a room with a team. I've got a group of people, so I get to speak and train for a living. So I'm very blessed.
So maybe your business could be beyond the dress and then beyond the address.
And beyond the address, exactly.
So, fantastic. And what she said so far is it's around doing a gap analysis. Where are you now and where do you want to go? What's that difference? And rather than what Lori said, rather than a gap analysis, maybe it's your filter. And then looking at changing your identity. Change your identity and do the micro wins. And the way you do it is by saying, after I, then I will, and then you celebrate.
So that's the little formula. That's BJ Fogg's formula to create a habit.
Right. Okay.
But also just to circle back, so when we're talking about gap analysis with your future self, what's also important to think about is the way we navigate our day. Because often when you think about future self, it could be, I want to be doing this in my career. If, for some people are saying, I'd love to have my own consulting business. If they're already in a corporate, it could be around what are the lifestyle changes? So what are the habits I want? But it's also, how do I want to feel as I navigate the day? And I know I touched on it earlier, but it could be, future me is calm under pressure. Future me is not going to take things personally, is going to not, maybe you need to work on the way you communicate with the team or with people. It's also thinking about, how would I love to show up? What's different about that person? How did they manage change? How did they manage? They are, super resilient. So it's also thinking, what do I need to develop to become that person?
And then what do you do when you fail? So there's a quote that I heard saying, you don't drown by falling in the water, you drown by not swimming once you've fallen in the water.
Yes.
And how do you swim in your world? You've given yourself identity. You say, I'm going to be calm under pressure. And then the next day you're not.
Okay.
What do you do?
So firstly, have a lens of compassion and have a lens of curiosity.
So it's compassion to yourself.
To yourself. Because the truth is, I teach and train on this and talking about habits. And the truth is, we are going to fall off the wagon. We could be doing great because generally when we get stressed, we tend to go back to patterns that are not great for us. We tend to default to actions that are not great for us. We know they're not great, but in stressful situations, it's human nature. Not to be negative, but it's not, am I going to slip? It's, I am going to slip. But when that happens, so how do we know we grow? So number one, you said, what do we do? I don't see it as a failure. Number one, have self-compassion. Okay. How are you speaking to yourself about it? You can beat yourself up. You can be critical. That's never going to help. It could be, you know what? Okay, so you had the piece of cake. You didn't want it. You were meant to get up for the run. Don't worry. Okay, what did we learn? So it's also micro choices. So there's micro wins, but it's micro choices. If that choice wasn't great, how do I make sure the next one is a better one? So don't ditch the whole day. Just make sure the next choice is better. Also, when I say have a lens of curiosity, step back and go, okay, what triggered me? What was my trigger that I went and I didn't get up, or I procrastinated? I know I should have got the document done. What was going on for me? And often, so let's take the habit of procrastination, because that's pretty common. Generally, we do it not because we're lazy. It's because there's a fear of failure. There's a fear of not being perfect. And then just acknowledge it. Why did I put that off?
But can you really can you see your trigger immediately, or does it deceive you sometimes?
Probably in the moment. So this is why, is that in the moment you probably, the stress took over. We could have a whole show about the inner critic and the inner rebel.
Yeah.
But there is this, everybody's got their own version of the inner critic of, oh, come on, just go do this. Or the inner rebel saying, just miss the workout. No one's watching. So in the moment, no, we're not going to catch ourselves. It's afterwards, but then it's, how am I dealing with it? And when I say just get curious, I was really stressed. Actually, I hadn't slept and I was so exhausted. Or if I'm being honest, I had this confrontation with someone at work and I was really angry, and whatever it is. But if you can use it as, it's a science lab, it's see it as, okay, what triggered me? What am I going to do differently next time? Okay, this is where I went off course. How can I correct it? And so growing doesn't mean we don't make mistakes. It means we notice it sooner and we course correct sooner.
So I've got an issue. Let's say I'm trying to lose weight. What I would do is I wouldn't eat. I would eat properly the whole day, and then I'd celebrate with a piece of cake at night. So that doesn't work. So, we sometimes sabotage ourselves.
Do you know what? And there's such a great book. Her name is Amy Johnson. And she says, often what we see as self-sabotage is really a form of self-care or self-love. So I care. And it's often you see it in a pattern of, certain people are great at keeping promises to everyone else. They say yes to everybody else. They're always serving and supporting everybody else, but they don't really show up in their own calendar. Now it's my turn. I'm going to look after me now, and then I go get the cake. And what feels like, okay, I'm caring for myself, in fact, is not, because it's not what we want, but in that moment. So sometimes what feels like sabotage is actually self-care. So if you say, I think there's so many things that go into it. If people want to be healthier, it's about planning, it's about consistency, and it's little changes. So don't try change too many things at once.
You talk about the consistency. So I'd like to unpack a little bit around that consistency, but let's do it after the ad break. Welcome back to the Ort Jet Business Show. I'm David Zidel. I'm talking to Lori Milner, and we've been talking about being consistent and having a system to work with, and self-care and love yourself. And sometimes we could feel like it mustn't be selfish. So I'd like to get to that a little bit later. But if we can start off just looking at creating that system and being consistent. So I know for myself, I will do things a couple of times and I'm making good progress, and then I'll fall off the wagon and I kind of never go back to that. And I give up and try something else. How do you get that consistency to it?
Such a great question. And for me, often, when people start thinking about changing a new habit, getting in shape, often the first thing I hear, I don't have time. You don't know my schedule. I don't have time. And that's why consistency is so powerful. Because if I said to you, could you find 15 minutes a day? And all of us, if we check the emails less, if we scrolled less, there's 15 minutes easily floating around there. And so if you can take that 15 minutes, for me, I always say, if you can own the first and the last 15 minutes of your day, you will start to change your day. I used to say the first hour of the day, and then I realized that's not always possible, but 15 minutes is always possible. So how do you start to do that? Number one, if you can train yourself to wake up 20 minutes earlier, so then you got to stop binge watching Netflix till 11. So you can wake up 20 minutes earlier. And it doesn't mean you need to wake up at 5 in the morning and be this 5 a.m. Just 15 minutes earlier than you used to, because the morning is going to unfold in a more predictable way. And it's also, if you can take charge of that morning. So the two things I always tell my clients, do not check your phone as you wake up. So you could have this grand plan. So the night before, also think about, what do I want to do when I wake up? Is it exercise? Is it journaling? Is it meditation? Is it studying? Is it prayer? Don't check your phone, because as soon as you see those messages, there's this feeling of there's too much going on. I can't do it. How I've got to put everybody else first. And so we ditch ourselves and we go straight into work.
So it's living consciously.
So it's consciously deciding, what am I going to do? So because you're talking about self-care. And sometimes if we can just start with 15 minutes, if we've got more time, great. But you've got to schedule it. And it's got to be, you can't wait to go, I know I should be doing this today. It's treated like a meeting in your diary.
So David Lappin said, if I can remember the quote correctly, he said, if you say you don't have time for something, it just means it's not a big enough priority.
100%.
And you saying, make it a priority and give it that space as if it's a meeting. Like for somebody else, you would do it, why not do it for yourself?
Yeah, and what you mentioned right at the beginning of the show is one of my favorite things that I always love to say is, it's about keeping the promise you make to yourself. So if you tell yourself, okay, tomorrow morning, it doesn't matter, let's say it's 6:30, I'm going to get up and I'm going to do my 15 minutes. When you keep that promise, that's when you build your confidence. That's when you start to feel good about yourself. It's when you break the agreement, all the negative self-talk comes up. So if you can be in the habit of showing up to yourself. So that's why I say the morning. If you're not a morning person, put it in the afternoon, put it whenever's going to work for you. But why we don't is we often think, oh, I need an hour, I don't have an hour. Start with 5 minutes. If 15 is too much, start with 5. Whatever's going to feel doable for you. But the consistency of doing it is, again, it's the system. I'm in the system of doing it, and then figure out how to make, if you want to expand on it, then you can do it.
So if I can ask you a question, so is this something for someone who's never been successful, or is this for someone who's a CEO of a company hugely successful and still needs this, or is it both? Does it work for everybody?
It works for everybody, because even the most successful, the high performers, you'll ask them, and there's very little of themselves in the calendar. So they are working, they are stressed, but unless you have a vehicle to manage that stress, unless you have a vehicle, an outlet, but even just from a health perspective, so everybody needs it. And often the most successful people are the ones who realize, if I'm not looking after me, if I'm not putting myself in that peak state for the day, if I'm not triggering myself in the morning, everybody else is going to. So that's the win. We speak about the micro win. When I'm starting my day on a win, it doesn't matter if you do one yoga pose, it doesn't matter whatever it is that you're looking to achieve, whether it's reading, whether it's don't journal a whole page, journal a sentence. Great, you've started.
And so years ago, I ran Comrades, and you had to write a thing saying, a commitment card saying that you're going to be doing. So before we actually started training, it was like, at this time, I'm going to run Comrades, and this is a commitment, and you signed it. So it's like signed and sealed. But then you needed a support buddy.
Yes.
Of where once a week you phoned them and you said, hey, I said I was going to run this. I actually have, or I haven't done it. With what you're saying, do you need a support buddy for that as well?
I think everybody's individual. So for me personally, I don't need an individual, I don't need an accountability buddy. I mean, I feel like I'm doing that for myself. But for a lot of people, you do. We always do best when other people are watching. So if that's going to help you, absolutely. But what I also want to circle back to is you said, because you made such a great point, we start. And then what happens? I'm doing it, I'm doing the win, I'm doing the consistency, but there's often a gap between doing the action and seeing the result.
Yes.
And that's where we fall down. That's where we go, well, I've been, training for 2 weeks now and I don't see any difference. And that's when we get despondent and we think, well, it doesn't work for me. So I always say, if you can trust the process of creating these micro wins, just follow the process. Don't think about it. Just show up to whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be every day, 2-3 times a week, whatever it is that you're looking to do. And then you turn down the volume of that inner critic who's going, well, you should be further by now. The scale should say this by now. You should be here by now. And just focus on the action. Focus on that right action.
But your words you've used now is focus on that right action.
Yes.
But there's always that seed of doubt. Let's say you're going to gym and you're trying to get strong and build muscle and whatever. And even if you are doing the right thing, and if you're not seeing the results, you kind of, not really, like I saw somebody else doing a different exercise. Maybe I should do that. How do you know that you're doing the right action and you stop doubting yourself?
Good question. I think some certain things are going to take longer than others. But for me, why it's so powerful in terms of just showing up and doing it. Number one, that discomfort, learning to move through that discomfort. So let's just say you started something and it's hard in the beginning. And then with time, what felt terrible, I can do a whole class now. 1K felt like torture. Geez, now I can do 3 and I'm so much stronger. So the reward of that growth, but going through that discomfort, that builds resilience, that builds grit. So yes, maybe it's in the gym or maybe it's on the road, but that skill will come with you into all other aspects of your life. When you're having to go through discomfort at work, discomfort, let's say you're moving roles. So actually a nice analogy that I can bring in, I wrote a blog on it recently, and I linked it to imposter syndrome. But actually it's an analogy that you can use, whether it's creating habits, whether it's going through change, whether it's managing discomfort. And when we first start doing something, I always use the analogy of travel. So the first time you go somewhere, we're a tourist. What does it feel like when we're a tourist? It's exciting, but it's quite overwhelming. And there's a bit of fear involved. I don't know the language. What if I get lost? What if I don't do this? So you over prepare and there's a bit of anxiety with it. Now you've been to the place 2 or 3 times and you're a local. What's it like to be a local? A lot more relaxed. I'm open to new things. I'm going to try different places. Now I know the transport, and you just start to become more comfortable in your own skin and you get a little bit braver. And now people are coming to you. You move to the next phase, which is being the guide. I go, I heard you've been there. I don't know anything. Please help me. And it's often your biggest failures, which are your best stories to share. So the point of it is saying, what phase am I in? So if you've just started something, let's say you want to start getting into training again, you're a tourist. So it's going to feel uncomfortable. And no one wants to feel out of their depth. But it's trusting with time and with experience, and especially when someone's moved into a new role, I don't like that feeling. I want to, I'm worried people aren't going to, they'll think that I don't know what I'm doing. But with time, you're going to be the local again. And then eventually you're going to be the guide. And once you're comfortable and you're leading teams, guess what? You move again and you're going to go back to the tourist role. But it's not that you're starting from the beginning. You're starting with all the knowledge and the wisdom that you've got. But it gives context. So when you just ask yourself, what phase am I in? Then it's normal to feel this discomfort. You've got to push through until you come to that next level of comfort.
So that quote, I think they said of what is hard today will one day just be your warm-up. And that's what you're saying, where you're going from being a tourist to then being the local, then being the guide.
Yes.
And sometimes I feel like I'm doing something and I become the guide and then I kind of leave it for a while and then I forget all the different things and I go back to becoming a local again.
And then you go back. But if you can see it from that context, because otherwise we feel, some we call ourselves imposters, or we feel like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. But that discomfort's normal.
So that word imposter syndrome, you've used it a bit, and I've heard it before, but I'm not sure if I really understand what that means. Can you unpack that concept for us?
Very simply, it's the belief, and this affects even the most successful people. I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't deserve to be here, and everyone's going to find out. So whether you've been promoted into a new role and you're feeling like, sure, am I supposed to be? That's why I say internalize the win. So when you keep acknowledging the wins along the way and you've really internalized, actually, I deserve to be here, and look what I've accomplished, that feeling's not going to show up. It's when we're not internalizing it, but it really is this fear and this belief that I don't deserve to be here.
But there's research that was done in America, and they asked CEOs, what's your biggest fear? And it was exactly what you're saying. The biggest fear that came out was the fear that somebody will find out I actually don't know what I'm doing.
That's imposter syndrome.
And so do we all have it all the time, or do some people not have it? Do they have complete self-belief?
So that's why I reframe it. So that's why I use it as a reframe to go, I'm not an imposter. I'm just feeling like a tourist.
I love that.
Because of course you're not an imposter, but that sense of discomfort, that sense of, because we all just want to get to the guide, but there's a process. You have to go through certain things. There's obviously certain learnings. There's always going to be new skills, but that's going to make us better leaders. It's going to make us have those resilience traits along the way. And it's just, one of my favorite quotes from Tony Robbins, and he says, the quality of your life is proportional to the amount of discomfort that you can comfortably live with. The amount of uncertainty you can comfortably live with. So in other words, the more that you can be okay with feeling uncomfortable, the more you're going to succeed.
Oh, wow. So it's like pushing those boundaries. So these are unbelievable stories. If you've just tuned in, you better listen to the podcast to pick up on what we've been talking about. It's Lori Milner, and she's talking about living with being uncomfortable, but growing through it. And use the analogy of when you first start doing something, you're the tourist. You don't know what's happening. Then you get a little bit more comfortable. You become the local, and then you become the expert, and you're the guide that's going through that. A lot of people, we taught as we grow up, don't be selfish. Don't, it's not about you, it's about everybody else. And we almost feel, you say, take that time in the morning. So a mother who gets up and you saying, take 15 minutes, and she feels, I can't do that. That's being selfish. And what about my kid? I'm there for my kid. How do you define it that it's self-care helps you? I don't know, to be selfless, or is it being selfish? And do you need to be selfish?
Unashamedly selfish. So I hear that all the time. How can I do that? I feel so bad. I give to everybody else. I don't give to. And the reality is guilt. To feel guilty about that is a wasted emotion. The truth is, if you are not energizing yourself, you are not going to show up as the best version of yourself. So if you want to show up as the best parent, if you want to show up as a great team member, as a leader, you need to be, and I'm going to use, and it's a cheesy cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason, from Oprah. And she said, you cannot serve from an empty cup. You've got to be doing something that you're filling yourself up, you're filling your own energy tank, because no one else is going to do it for us. And that's what I'm saying. If you can just be comfortable with 15 minutes, what is it? I always say to people, what if I gave you the day off? What would you spend your time doing? Or even, in your December, what did you spend your time doing? And maybe it's not even a self-care thing. It could be painting. It could be gardening. Comes up all the time across men and women. Okay, so where in your week are you building in time for that? It could be prayer. It could be just reading a quote. But if we are not putting ourselves in the calendar, if it's you giving to everybody else, because what happens is we get resentful. And then we want to show up as the best and give the best, but we're giving the crumbs. And then everybody else gets the best of us. And then we come home and then we give our family the spare parts.
It's like when you go on an airplane and they say, if something happens, oxygen mask will fall from the ceiling, put it on yourself first before you help others. Because if you're not in a position, if you're helping others, you could die yourself.
So then the question is, you should be asking yourself, what is my oxygen mask? What do I need? Even if it's 15 minutes, that I'm fueling myself, that I'm energizing myself.
How do you find that so-called oxygen mask then, if you don't know what it is? So for so long, you've been running and helping others that you don't even know what you need.
Yeah.
How do you find that?
So my favorite question that I ask my clients, because some people will go, I don't know. And I always say, think back to a time when you were at your best. So think back to that time. It could be, and I've had people say to me when I was in matric, when I was in varsity, before I had my kids in my 20s, and I'll say, because it's that, and when I say your best, it's when you felt so confident, when you felt like you were in your zone, where you really just were that best version, energized. And for me, success leaves clues. I'll say, great, what were you doing? Well, I was planning my day. I was really structured. I was walking 3 days a week. I was planning my meals. I was reading a lot more. Do you read now? No. Someone said to me, I was meditating every day. I said, do you do that anymore? No. So if you're not sure now, go back to a time when you were at your best. Choose one thing. And again, it's giving yourself, and for me, it's the simplest piece of advice is give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to say, you know what, I'm going to take the next 30 minutes or 20 minutes just for me, plan it, prep whatever you can the night before, and then enjoy it. And you're probably going to feel guilty on the first day. You're probably going to feel, oh, I'm doing something wrong. And that discomfort doesn't mean I'm doing something wrong. It's I'm doing something right. It's uncomfortable because I'm not used to it. But when you do that enough and you start to associate it with pleasure, you start to associate it with, wow, I'm feeling so much better. You can't imagine your day without it. So you have to show yourself first. You can't talk yourself into it. You actually have to do it.
But also you'll feel a little bit like a tourist when you do it the first time, because even if you fold your hands and your arms, if you fold your arms,
Yes.
it's a habit of putting which arm goes on top. And if I tell you to do it the other way around, it's going to be difficult to do. So if you're trying something for the first time, even if it's something that's going to be so pleasure for you or something you want to do, it'll still feel awkward when you start.
Absolutely, because the belief is I'm doing something wrong. But also the other reason that stops us is, and depending on, so I'm sure most of your listeners are all high achievers and high performers, but there's the sense that what I'm doing there must be an outcome attached to it. So I'll read a business book because I can attach that to work. Yes, I'm learning, it's being productive. So I'll give myself permission to do that. If I want to go and paint, if I want to go and watch a course on whatever it is, maybe that's not work related, but I'm really passionate about, or I feel like I'm cheating. I was working with someone and he used the phrase, it's like I'm stealing quiet moments. But he really needs that. And I said, just think about the word stealing. I said, you're making it feel like that you're doing something wrong. He said, wow, I never thought about that. So also think about the words that you attach to it. But it does, if the outcome is it brings you joy, if the outcome is actually this is what I need to be at my best, that should be enough.
So when you talk about your identity, so you change your identity, but what you're saying is change the identity of even the descriptive words that you use.
Absolutely.
Because, I'm stealing time makes it feel like I shouldn't be doing this.
Yes, I'm quoting Tony Robbins again, but he says the word you attach to your experience becomes your experience. And again, people think about when someone says, how are you? Oh, I'm stressed. I'm exhausted. I'm so hectic. I'm burnt out. Often the words, someone will say, oh, Lori, I'm stuck. And I'll say, well, are you stuck or are you a little uncertain? I'm like, no, I'm more uncertain because stuck feels permanent. Stuck feels like I can't move. It's claustrophobic. Can't go left, can't go right. But uncertainty we can unravel.
If you're speaking to somebody and someone's just joined us now,
yes,
and they've just turned on the radio, and if you've just turned on, you're listening to Lori Milner talking about how to organize your life, that you in control of your life. Your life's not controlling you. Give us kind of a summary for someone who's just tuned in. What can you do today? Like what are those steps? What are the lessons you would tell somebody? The key 3-4 things that you would tell somebody
based on what we chatted about today,
or based on what we've spoken about, or something else.
Okay, so I would say don't manage your minutes, design your life.
Wow, okay.
So it's about lifestyle
So it's the
design.
bigger picture you're talking about. It's not the,
So often we think, I'm going to plan my day and I'm going to do this, but it's not just about minute management. It's not just, but it's when I say lifestyle design, what does that morning look like? What does an ideal average day look like? Design your day that you are in it. Design your day that it's an enjoyable day. We can't, and also why I say maybe another thing is take ownership of the first and last 15 minutes of the day. We can control that. The rest of the day, don't know what's going to show up. But that's why so what does that morning look like? What does that evening look like? How am I going to sleep? Am I scrolling? Am I on the phone? Am I checking emails? What if I replace that with reading? What would that look like? So that's when I say try and control the evening. Plan what you can do for the next day. I would say,
what happens if you plan to scroll your phone? If that's what you want to do.
if that's what you want to do and it makes you happy, by all means. But I've had people say, I'm battling to sleep, or I'm waking up at 2 a.m, my mind is racing, I don't know how to get back to sleep. And I'll say, tell me what you do an hour before bed. And they'll say, I'm scrolling and I'm working. So not everybody is going to have that. If you love it and it makes you happy and it works for you, great. There's no right or wrong. It's also knowing yourself. But sometimes it's these tiny little tweaks that makes a bigger change. The other thing I would say is be deliberate in scheduling yourself, even if it's for 15 minutes a day, and keep the promise you make to yourself.
So I think if we sum up what you've said, and you've repeated it a few times, and I think I'm getting the message now, is first of all, own your day, the first 15 minutes. So anybody listening to this, even if you've just tuned in, let's all just try this, and I'm going to try. The first 15 minutes of the day and the last 15 minutes of the day, have a plan on what you're going to be doing.
Yes.
And then with that, you need to kind of, before you do that, is maybe go and say what you said in the beginning of what I want to look like in 5 years'
Yes.
time. And will this feed into that?
Yes.
And so, and then you do it and you say, after I do this, I will achieve something. And how am I going to celebrate that? And I think what you said as well is it's going to be uneasy in the beginning. So you're like a tourist, then it becomes a little bit more, you're like the local, and then you're an expert at it, the guide. And I think you said success leaves clues.
Yes.
And it's looking back, but also success builds on success. And if you achieve these little things, then you can become better at it. And maybe the more you do it, the more consistent you'll become. And then you feel like you're not a consistent or disciplined person. And when you're disciplined in the one area, then you become more disciplined in other things.
Yeah, because consistency becomes the superpower when you're uncomfortable and it's taking longer. As long as you are consistent, it doesn't matter how much time, but it's the frequency.
Wow.
Then time is never an issue.
That's amazing. You say time's never an issue.
It can't be an excuse, even if you say, okay, I don't have time for a 20-minute meditation. Bring mindfulness into the mundane.
Time's not an issue, but in this case, it is an issue
because we've run out of time.
We've run out of time. We're going to wrap up. I'm David Zidel. This has been Lori Milner, and this has been the Ort Jet Business Show.